I'd like to talk about the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee meeting outcome. I have joining me via telephone to talk on the implications of the MPC's decision, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist. Glad to have you join us, Mr. Kelvin. Oh,
Thank you
Mr.
so much
Emmanuel.
for having me. It's always a privilege to be here.
Okay. Going by the decision of the MPC, were you expecting they would definitely hold the monetary policy rates? And at this point, interest rate is still high.
I'll tell you that, the GDP rebasing was just announced, which shows that Nigeria's GDP was rebased by 40% to 230 billion or 372 trillion. Inflation, in my view, is above 30%, headline inflation.
Yeah.
The numbers that MBS is giving you is based on what I call a faulty foundation. Faulty foundation in terms of what the contributors to inflation are. For example, if you look at the grouping of gas, water, petrol, if you look at household expenses, that they classified 5 items as about 15.6%. Energy alone, before that inflation rebasing, was actually 20%. Food was 60%, which means food and energy was 80%. So the fact that they reclassified it and decreased the contribution of energy that has gone up from 197 naira to about 910 naira per liter within the last 24 months is the reason why you see that the inflation actually came down. But then the question is the fact that the Monetary Policy Implementation and Technical Committees of the MPC at the Central Bank of Nigeria has refused to follow inflation targeting, because usually the central bank maintains interest rates at 4% target rate of inflation, which means that if the CBN actually believes that inflation was 22 point something percent, they will reduce interest rates to somewhere around 18.5 or 19%. And the fact that they're holding MPR at 27.5%, and then you're seeing prime lending rates, at 32%, and then commercial lending rates for customers that don't have clean lines with their banks at anywhere around 32 to 35, 36%, shows you clearly that there is a problem with the inflation rebasing.
Okay. Well, you said there's a problem with the inflation rebasing. So at this point, what, as in terms of the decision they have taken, do you think they're on the right path, or do you think they need to increase, or they need to decrease?
Listen, interest rates has gone from 13.5% to 27.5%. That's an increase of 100%. Within the last 6 years. Interest rates was about 13.5% 6 years ago. Today is about 27.5%. I'll give you a typical example, a real life example that borders on companies and the lives of Nigeria. The company called Cam Industries, for example, that is FX forward held by the central bank, and they've seen the interest on their overdraft loans for FX they applied for in 2021 gone up to about 21 billion naira in overdraft charges. That's an example of how interest rates is affecting companies in Nigeria, especially in the real sector. And that cascades into inflation. So the CBN is not at fault. The CBN is not to blame. We can say that the violation of ways and means contributed to inflation, because you had $53 billion that was injected into the system without real actual value to back it up, or without assets or reserves to back the quantitative easing that was implemented by Central Bank of Nigeria in violation of Section 38 of the CBN Act of 2007. We can say that. But when it comes to the demand pool side, the actual production, if you look at the contributions to GDP, for example, you see industry, you see agriculture, you see services. You see that industry went from 21% to 16%. Agriculture also dropped marginally. Food inflation is a major driver, and it's affected the GDP of Nigeria, because GDP dropped from $100 billion, it dropped to $188 billion. Now it's gone up to $230 billion. Okay? So if you ask me, do I think the CBN is on the right track? I think there's been progress, the CBN we have today is not what it used to be 24 months ago. But I think that the monetary policy side is handicapped by the lack of proper capital formation and proper fiscal reforms from the fiscal authorities. Now, the tax bills that has become law that the president signed a few weeks ago is a step in the right direction. Because when you start implementation in 2026, you're going to see tax to GDP ratio that I estimate at anywhere around maybe 11% currently increase. And I'm expecting that by 2030 is going to go up to 18 or 20%. That will reduce the pressure on the government to borrow money through the rolling debt stock. It will also reduce the pressure on the government to tap on, capital debt market instruments or ways and means to be able to fund budget deficit. And, realign your macroeconomic modeling to support, because this whole, valuation of ways and means and devaluation of the naira that led to inflation, that led to GDP coming down, and then the rebasing exercise we've seen came primarily from the government's inability to finance its budget. That's where it started from. That's where the problem started from. And it's affecting companies and it's affecting the lives of Nigerians, because the biggest problem in Nigeria today is the cost of living crisis. That's the biggest problem we have today.
Okay. Mr. Emmanuel, you've made a case, a very strong case here. But now the central bank is saying that they've hit $40 billion in reserves. What does this tell you about investor confidence at this point?
So the $40 billion in reserves are actually not net external reserves. If you look at the net asset ratio of Nigeria, they are not net external reserves. That's why when you review the notes that JP Morgan wrote a few months ago in response to the CBN releasing the annual report, they talked about quality of external reserves. Quality of external reserves speaks about the kind of the kind of investment you're bringing, the kind of monies that are coming into Nigeria in terms of dollar flows. Are they FPIs or are they patient capital? Okay, so when you have FX flows that are usually 1 to 2 year with forwards to hedge, risk of fluctuations in your exchange rate, then you don't have proper external reserves that are of high quality grade. So I don't agree that you have $40 billion in external reserves, because a major chunk of that $40 billion that the CBN is quoting is actually encumbered. And moreover, if you have unencumbered external reserves, right, that are not held back by any debt obligation, you will see much more stability in the foreign exchange market, and you will see the naira appreciate more than it is, because I honestly believe that the naira is undervalued by at least 28 to 30% currently.
Okay. Now, before I let you go, what would you like to see from both fiscal and monetary authorities do to accelerate the progress we're making? Because right now we're really not making much progress.
So I want to see better capital formation. I want to see an end to the resource-based, reserve-based lending, where an MPC uses its barrels to pledge in exchange for loans. I want to see better capital formation. I want to see more fiscal responsibility from the government. I want to see you diversifying your composite index and not just relying on crude oil and gas as a way to, hedge your balance of trade, and that affects your exchange rate, because the exchange rate is very critical to so many other variables in the economy.
Okay.
I want to see you diversify to solid minerals. Nigeria has a huge chunk of gold that is illegally mined and, taken out of Nigeria. If we can adopt what Ghana adopted a few months ago, where it enacted a law that obligates small, artisanal and large-scale miners to sell a percentage of what they mine to the central bank, that's the Bank of Ghana, as bullion, physical bullion.
Okay.
To provide much more basis for external reserves and for hedging the exchange rate, which has an implication on inflation and interest rates also.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Well, next time we have conversation, I hope and I expect to see you live in our studios. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.